Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today is one that I got as an idea from you guys. It was just worded very differently in every suggestion, but my friend Krista kind of worded it, I would say, the best, and that is some of my roller coaster plants. Someone also said whirlwind romance plants, and what that means is that it's the plants that I have a relationship with that definitely have very obvious ebb and flow periods. It's not always just like smooth sailing like it kind of is with a plant like my tordum, or who else is pretty easy? My billy. Like, I don't consider me to have sort of a tumultuous relationship with those plants, but these 7 plants, I would say we have definitely an up and down relationship. I feel like I've seen like the highest of the highs with them, at least some of them, and then the lowest of the lows. So in this video, I'm gonna try as best as I can throw in some supporting photos showing sort of the plant at its best or at its worst. I'll try and do the best that I can, but just want to give you sort of a little backstory on what this video is, and also give you a backstory on, I guess, our relationship in general. So we're just gonna get started. I'm gonna just start with the one closest to me, and I feel like some of you are gonna see this coming. The anthurium clarinervium. I don't know what it is about this plant, but it's definitely, we have a whirlwind romance. I know this thing is gonna stick to me, so I'm gonna just remove it for now. I think if you did a poll in like a plant group and you asked whether you thought the clarinervium was an easy plant or a hard plant, I feel like it would be pretty split. Maybe I should actually, I'm gonna put that poll on my Instagram right now, and then I'll show you the results of it. Actually, I think I'll do it for all of these plants, and I'll throw in like the polls results here after. Okay. So yeah, my guess, not knowing what the results are yet, I think it's gonna be pretty split down the middle in terms of people who say that it's really easy, no fuss, you don't have to mess with it, and then others who just like can't grow it for jack crap. I have owned clarinerviums before. They all died in my care, quite a few of them. I think I have a three death count now under my belt. Not proud of it. My friend Ren gave me advice one day and just said, treat it like a succulent. And at the time, it really made no sense. Like, of all of my plants in my collection, I would never have treated this like a succulent. I never in a million years. She's like, let it dry out. Don't be scared to just let it go like small periods where it doesn't have water. But when you are ready to water it, give it a good drink. And that's what I've been doing. It's not a beast of a clarinervium. I feel like a lot of people who are really good at growing this plant have like these humongous plants, multiple leaves on one stem, so many growth points coming out, and I'm just not one of those people. But you know what I will take? I will take 2 seemingly very healthy, happy looking leaves. This is a win for me in my book. Right now on this roller coaster, we're at a high. We're definitely at a high because it could look so much worse than this. And actually, let me show you worse. If you want to know what my journey with the clarinervium has looked like before, it would look a little something like this, but like 10 times worse. This is actually like really good. If I didn't have this plant and I only had this one, I'd be like, I am killing it. Look at me. I'm a clarinervium girl. And I just, yeah. Any leaves that aren't melting off, that aren't turning all crispy, that aren't just melting, to me that's a success. But because I have my other one that looks so much better than this one, I'm using this as an example. But yeah, I just have not had really the best luck with the clarinervium. So ever since I took that advice of just treating it like a succulent, not doing like super regular waterings, and allowing a little bit of a dry period, but then watering really deeply, and I do have this in a pot with drainage, it's worked out really well. And knock on wood, I didn't just jinx myself, but I am hoping that, you know, once this thing kind of gets going a little bit more, that we'll have more of a bushy plant, because I don't know, I really enjoy those big clarinervium bushes. Sometimes I enjoy an anthurium if it's just one leaf. Like for me, I love like the verrucoianum when it's just a single leaf. I don't really care for a verrucoianum with like multiple leaves, like kind of sprawling out 360. It's just not my jam. Same with the veitchii. I don't really care for that one either if it has like 10 million leaves. Like you could just have one nice beautiful leaf that just satisfies that itch for me. But the clarinervium specifically, I love these leaves so much. I think this could be one of my favorite anthurium leaves in terms of like the way it looks. And so when you have something that's really bushy and has multiple leaves and it kind of all like faces the front, and I'll try and find a good photo. Hopefully I can find a good photo for you guys. But that's like the vibe that I'm going for when I think of owning a clarinervium. It's just, I know that some people will like put multiple plants in one pot and you know, you can get a nice bushy plant that way. But for me, I'm not going to subject myself to that kind of torture by putting multiple clarinerviums in one pot because I'm struggling just to keep the two that I have alive. So we're not going to do that, but I'm hoping that over time, as this plant gains a little bit more speed and stability and endurance, you know, it can hold on to more leaves, because right now we're sort of always in like the 2 to 3 leaf club, which I feel is really great, but I would like to have something a little bushier if possible. But, you know, definitely whirlwind romance with this clarinervium. I feel like I'm still sort of like walking on eggshells. I'm not super duper confident. I kind of feel like I'm in this weird sort of lucky zone where it's not actually me that's caring for it really well. I'm just getting lucky right now, and then it's gonna take a downhill turn. But that's just the pessimist in me. I always kind of like expect the worst. Obviously, I would love if that wasn't the case and I truly was doing something right for once with this plant, but I'm not holding my breath. Okay, next one is, oh my gosh, these are all philodendrons. That was the only anthurium. Okay, so the next one, my friends, is my philodendron gloriosum. So I'm gonna show you what this plant looked like sort of in its prime, when it was like looking its absolute best. I was just so smitten with this plant. I couldn't believe how lucky I got. It was a great import. It was a really decent, it was a really decent size. Okay, if my voice, okay, I need some, it's just water. It's just water, look. Sorry, my voice was cutting out. Like I was saying, I'm not giving you a belly rub right now, dude. I'm not. Nope. No, not right now. Maybe later in like 1 hour. How about that? He's so stinking cute. He just has his little paw on me. You just have your little paw on me. Okay, well, if you're not gonna give me a kiss, then that's not fair for me. What was I saying? Yeah, so this was the plant at its peak. Pudge, you're gonna be covered. This was the plant at its peak. And again, when I imported it, so when I imported this plant, it was a great size. It was a pretty mature plant already, and I was given like a good sort of foundation to work with. I can't remember like what the root situation was like, but I don't remember really having a hard time acclimatizing this thing. And it was really just, from my recollection, uphill from the time I imported it. And every new leaf I got, it just got slightly larger and slightly larger. The veins got slightly more pronounced, they got brighter, I got more secondary venation, and it just kept turning into like my dream gloriosum. Something in me kind of knew in my mind that I had been sort of jinxing it all along. I don't know why, because it's, I don't know, again, I'm just a pessimist. I'm like, there's no way that like, you know, this gloriosum that should in theory like be dead in my house is doing so well, and like I can't believe this is mine, and like I grew this, and I was just so in love with it. Like seriously, I was like on cloud 9, had all the butterflies, and at one point it was just all I put my focus into. I was like, I love this plant so much, and never really had any issues with like root rot or like anything like that. It was pretty low key, but two issues that I did have with it was, one, spider mites. That plant loved spider mites. It was like the hostess with the mostest, you know, it just always invited spider mites to it and just gave it such a loving, warm home. And it's even worse than my McDowell. My Dean McDowell, which is somewhere up there with spider mites, that thing loves spider mites, but this plant loved it even more, and it had an even larger like surface area to work with in terms of like housing all of these spider mites. So it was one trip in particular where I went to Sacramento. Before I left, I knew that it had spider mites, but it was kind of under control because I was giving it a lot of like showers. I was spraying it down a bunch. I was using like pretty harsh chemicals to get it under control. And I was like, oh, it'll probably be fine. It was not fine. When I got back, it was like the most intense webbing I've ever seen, and it's really hard to spot spider mites if it's not a really bad infestation, whereas this one, you could be like 10 feet away and you could see them crawling along the webs, and they were like these big, black and fat. They were well fed, and it was just awful. So not only was it infested with spider mites, had the spider mite damage, but because the plant was like reacting to so much stress, I think there was so much EFN on it. And I had already been struggling with EFN before the spider mites, and that usually is what happens in my house when I grow gloriosum outside of a greenhouse. Inside of a greenhouse, I could grow them so pristine. The leaves are beautiful, fully formed, really dark and nice. But I don't like growing those kinds of plants inside, not inside, but like in a greenhouse. They just get too big, they grow too fast, and for me, it's just not a plant that I see feasible growing inside of a greenhouse for long term. So I just choose not to, even at the expense of having some cosmetic damage. So anyway, yeah, this plant just took a beating, and it was so hard for me. This was probably one of the most painful times where I've had to like make a decision to chop something back. Usually I don't have too much of like an attachment issue with my plants when I need to like trim leaves back, because I'm like, I know it'll grow back. It's not the end of the world. It's not like I'm throwing the plant away. But with this plant specifically, I had the scissor like this. I was holding it, and a single tear was falling from my cheek. It was so painful. I was devastated. I had to chop it back. There was no saving the leaves. The damage was so bad that like, even if I kept the leaves, it just was not nice to look at. All you saw was just bright green leaves, some with yellow, with just spots all over, and it had like that dusty look of spider mite damage all on the front. So I chopped it back, and this was a while ago. This was like a year ago, I think. So if you guys are wondering what it looks like now, this is her in all of her teeny tiny glory. Oh man, it's hard. It's really hard to reminisce and look at photos of like this glory. I'm not calling it a glorious. Have I been calling it a glorious? It's hard to look at old photos of this gloriosum, old videos from this channel of the gloriosum, because I included it in, I would say, like at least 3 favorites videos, because again, it was just a plant that I was literally in this romance with. Like, you could not knock me off that cloud. That cloud. Did you guys hear that? I hope my neighbor's okay. But this is what's left of her. Honestly, I'm just glad that this chunk is alive because it has such great genetics, and I really wanted a piece of this plant back. Some very small part of me that wanted to keep the optimism alive is like, well, you know, at least I can start over and I won't be stressed out with such a huge plant. But it was so nice seeing that large plant, and I loved looking at it every day. I was enjoying it in my living room, and it was just a dream. So I don't know, I got literally knocked down to the beginning. Not even the beginning. I got knocked down like 5 million pegs, because remember when I brought it in from Ecuador, it was already a pretty big plant. So yeah, This is where we are now, and it's looked like this for a very long time. Honestly, I didn't get a leaf on this until very recently. I think I chopped it a year ago, or maybe even more than a year ago now. It was just a stick for a long time, and it only pushed out its first leaf maybe like a month or a month and a half ago, and it's going nowhere fast. I do need to get it out of moss. I think I'm gonna switch this to tree fern fiber and kind of just like get things moving, but she's just a humble little nugget now. But again, I'm just looking on the bright side, you know, I do have other plants that have like exploded with growth in the last year, and so it's almost like the house is keeping this natural balance of plants, you know, because if like everything gets too big, then it gets a little bit unmanageable. I can't fit everything. So that's what I'm telling myself, that it's out of my control, and my plants are just, they're all in this together, you know, and they're like taking turns on like who gets to grow really big and then who dies down. That is what I'm going to tell myself. So yeah, number 2 on the roller coaster plants is my philodendron gloriosum, and I imported it as a zebra, so that's what we're calling it. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to include this on the list or not, only because I haven't been a pink princess owner for a very long time. I'm still sort of a new pink princess parent. I think I got this plant, I know it was somewhere close to one of my California trips. Sorry, I do a lot of timelines based on these trips back home and holidays and stuff, but I think I've had this for like less than a year. I don't think I've had this for more than a year, and everything was kind of going swimmingly at first. I don't know if you guys remember, but I received this as a gift from Plant Some CA. It was one plant, but it had like 3 other plants growing at the base, and it was just this big bushy thing, beautiful variegation. I couldn't have asked for like a prettier pink princess, and it was fine, honestly, for a long time. I left it as it was. I didn't repot it, didn't separate out the plants. I think I just put like a bamboo stake or like a chopstick or something, and it was growing just fine. The issue that I have with this plant is not anything related to watering or root rot or, you know, I mean, everyone kind of deals with those like stupid freaking pink princess leaves that like do the slipper or the stuck foot thing in the slipper. That's always been an issue for me, but I've kind of known what to expect when I got my pink princess, that's like what I would have experienced too. So that is not so much an issue, but the issue that I'm having is with this weird sort of like, oh, of course I don't have any leaves to show you now because they've all been chopped off or grown out, but why am I showing this to you then? The issue that I was having before was these not only like copper rust spots, which I think maybe was some sort of like copper rust fungus. You can kind of see some of the spots here, but I was having issue with like essentially what looked like burnt leaves. Like it literally looked like it was torched by fire or something, and I got multiple people telling me like what they think it could be and like things that they've observed with their plants. I had everything under the sun, not too much or not enough light, too much light, not enough humidity, too much humidity, problems unfurling out of the sheath, under fertilization, over fertilization. And it's just really hard to like really know for sure what it was, but it was really strange because usually I can look at a plant and sort of have an idea of what I'm working with, like what could be going on with the plant. But I looked at this plant and, you know, kind of went through like what it was doing as it was unfurling, what the conditions were when it was unfurling, and I just could not pinpoint it. It would be like a leaf that came out completely normal, like this. It would look like this for a while, and then all of a sudden it would just start, you know, like showing these like weird little burn marks sort of like in the center of the leaf. I don't have any to show you at the moment because they were all down here, and I have since, you know, removed them, or they've just kind of fallen off. So it kind of seems like we're on the up and up now, but I'm really just holding my breath because I don't trust this plant, for one, and two, I just don't understand it enough. I don't understand the genetics of this plant enough. I don't understand the tendencies enough for this plant. I haven't owned it long enough to make any sort of observations that I feel comfortable telling you guys like this is what I think. Right now I'm kind of just like walking on eggshells around it and hoping that it just kind of stays really nice and pretty. But I do really enjoy this plant. I didn't think that I would, just because I'm not a huge pink plant lover, as I've told you guys a million times, but I do think it's because it has such a beautiful green color with it. It's really unlike any other green on a plant. Like even comparing it to this, it's not quite the same. Like it almost has sort of like this turquoise-ish undertone and not really green, and then also just like black cherry at the same time, especially on the emergent leaves. The emergent leaves are so freaking pretty. So I'm hoping to get some size on this thing. I do really love the look of a really mature pink princess, although I also don't mind it when it's this size too, and it's much easier to photograph. But I wanted to include it just because it's one of those plants that have done something where I just can't quite figure it out yet. And even though it's looking okay now, I'm still kind of expecting that some of those issues are gonna return because I haven't diagnosed what the issue is. So for that reason, it has made this list. Are you guys being tagged in these freaking Shein scam things on Instagram? I'm literally tagged in at least 4 stories a day and then like 2 posts where it's like, you've won a Shein gift card. How do I make it stop? It's so annoying. And you know what else is annoying? Freaking Temu. I'm getting literally at least 5 to 6 emails every week from different people from Temu wanting to do like a sponsored video. I've already said no. I've said no a million times, and they keep more and more people email me. It's like they have this massive like marketing team and nobody talks to each other. It's like if I say put me on a do not call list, I feel like they don't have one. It's just they're all like on their own, like trying to find people to collab with, and I'm like, I'm good, I'm fine.
Leave me alone.
Anyway, who should we do next? I think I'm gonna save the most painful 2 for last, and I feel like you guys know who it is. So let's jump into the 3rd to last. This is gonna be a short video, by the way. I've gotta get some short videos in the queue or my voice is gonna be completely gone. So this is my heterocraspedon. I love seeing this on camera. I don't show it very often because of the fact it's such a roller coaster plant. I feel like, okay, going back in the archives here, she's thinking. I feel like at some point on this channel, you would have heard me saying how easygoing this plant is and how not difficult it's been to grow since getting it. The only thing I really struggled with was getting a solid root system. And even now with the size of this plant, I still don't have like a really good root system. I can't see any roots on the side of this vessel at all. And in theory, it should, like for as long as it's been in this vessel, it should be super rooted. I don't know why this plant just doesn't like to root. I think that's something that I'm gonna tackle today. And I think you'll be able to see it in my week of in May. Sorry, I don't even know when this video is going up. Anyway, if you want to see me repot this plant on camera, watch my week of in May. I'm going to do that today. So anyway, yeah, I've, kind of mentioned how this one was a really easygoing one, and for the way it looks, I would have expected it to be a little bit more difficult. But honestly, besides the rooting thing, it's been pretty low-key. But the reason that it's on this roller coaster video is because I had a good period where like I didn't really have to think about this plant too much. It just kind of lived wherever I put it, and even with a very, very dicey root system, it still continued to grow. It still continued to put out leaves for me. But then very randomly, just out of nowhere, it started doing things like this. And I wish I could have taken, or I wish I did take more photos of the leaves that came before this, but there were much smaller leaves that all just looked like this. And I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know what was happening to it. Just kept getting these like sort of crispy tips and like this bright yellow color, and it just, yeah, kind of scared me. And so I really didn't know what was going on. I just kind of ignored it, and it kind of resolved on its own. Like, these leaves have looked like this forever. Another reason why this is on my, hold on. Another reason why, sorry, I thought that was a thrift, because I haven't seen a thrift in so long in this house. I'm like, if this is a thrift, I'm gonna scream. But it's moss. Another issue I was having with this plant was with thrips and spider mites, and I just like could not get rid of it. I do think that the plant reacted a little bit weird to having pests, but once I got that sorted, I started having issues with the leaves coming out of this caterpillar. So I've actually had more leaves than what you see on here, but I've already had 2 aborted caterpillars. So it like looks like this, where it seems like it's gonna start pushing something out, and then once like something starts emerging, it just stops and then it just dies inside of the caterpillar. So it's done that twice in a row now. I haven't really had a new leaf on this thing in a while, and that's why I have it on my roller coaster list. It's like, it was really good in the beginning, very like little fuss, don't pay attention to it, and then it became a plant where I'm like, what the heck is it doing? It feels like it needs everything in the world right now, and I don't really know what it is exactly. And now that like this has stopped and I like got that issue under control, now I'm having issues with the new leaves coming out, and I'm like, maybe it needs more CalMag, I don't know. So whirlwind romance for sure, and I love this plant so much. I really want to see, hopefully this year, some like nice long juicy leaves on this puppy. I feel like I've been so patient. I've waited so long. I don't remember when I imported this, but I feel like it's been forever. And it's just a really slow process, and it's definitely not as fast of a grower as my Patriciae is. My Patriciae puts out 2 times more leaves, I would say, than this one does, but I have had, I would say, more issues with my Patriciae than this one. The only reason I didn't include my Patriciae is because, I don't know, we have a love-hate relationship, and I didn't really want to see her today. All right, these last 2 are painful. Really painful. I'm gonna start first with my philodendron majestic. So I'm gonna scoochy, and I started with a plant that wasn't huge. It was, I would say the leaf was maybe about this big. It was in a 4-inch pot, and this was back in the day when I was still using traditional moss poles, like the ones that look like corn dogs, where you wrap the sphagnum moss around a bamboo stake and then you put like the string. So I was still using those moss poles. I was using the netted moss poles, and I just wasn't having a great time in terms of trying to get the leaves to size up. So it wasn't until I really started using the lazy poles that I noticed some traction with the leaf size. And yeah, things were going really great. I think at one point I had it on like a D-shaped pole. I just noticed some really significant leaf size growth on that plant once like the root system got really established on that pole, and I was so excited. I was like, I'm finally gonna have like the majestic of my dreams. And it's weird because I like the majestic leaf up to a certain point. I feel like once it reaches a certain size, it kind of loses that like silveriness and that majesticness. But very recently, Amanda, I don't know if you guys, I mean, I talk about her so much on this channel. Amanda, who is known as Bunny, she just grows majestic like a freaking beast. And she has these really huge majestic leaves. And not traditionally, but I normally would not like a leaf that size, but hers are just so dark and pillowy and beautiful. And even though it doesn't have as much silver, it still very much has like that hint of silver, which makes it really pretty. So if you're wondering if I changed my mind, the answer is yes, I have changed my mind about mature majestic leaves, and now my goal is just to grow one as large as possible. Now here's the gag, is that Amanda grows hers in the middle of her living room, and it's not like attached to any pole or anything. She's literally like held the leaves on with like string, and it's like tied to a wall, and she chops her top off like, I don't know, at least once a year. I think at some point she was like gonna get rid of the whole thing entirely because she couldn't keep up with how fast it grew. Whereas me, I've like got mine in an EXO. I feel like I'm giving it the world, and it just continues to look like crap. I did get it to size up to a certain point where I was like, holy smokes, we are getting somewhere. And then something happened. I don't know what it was, but the leaves just started yellowing, just getting like all yellow around the edges. I looked at the vessel, like the roots look completely healthy, but the lower leaves were dying off. The new leaves like were not unfurling correctly, and it's just like everything went wrong. It's like it just completely malfunctioned. Whereas like once I grew it to a certain point, I felt like it was pretty easy, and I was just like making sure to give it water and fertilizer. But yeah, it crashed, had a very, very bad time in the end. And it was kind of like my glorious again, where I just felt like, okay, there needs to come a point where I have to say like, when is the right time to throw in the towel, and like how far am I willing to go to try and save these leaves that already look kind of crappy. And so I chopped it back. So here is what the Majestic looks like now. For a long time, it was literally like so severely neglected. I just had it in like water in a cup, and it was just like sitting in the corner of my plant room. Like I literally had just like given up all hope. I honestly felt really defeated, and I felt like, I don't know, kind of disappointed too, because this plant really took me on a high, like a high where I was like, I love this hobby. Like I feel like I'm getting the hang of this plant thing a lot more, and I was really proud of myself. So it's weird when you have these moments of just like feeling like you're at the very, very top, and then all of a sudden like you're humbled, and it's like anything could go wrong for whatever reason. And that's kind of where we are right now. So for a little bit I did neglect it, more so because I was like, whatever, like I'm not going to give it the time of day, you know, I'm already like so like frustrated with it. I just don't want to deal with it. And so it was just sitting, yeah, in water for a long time. All of the new leaves were growing in really tiny. So I ended up just starting completely over. I threw away so much of the plant. I chopped off a bunch, and I just stuck with, I think it was like a 3-leaf cutting, and I put it in here, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try now. So I did, and it has rooted into this pole already, which is a mixture of chopped up moss and tree fern fiber. The top here is the perfect example of what kind of happens to a new propagation. So you'll kind of see sometimes that a new leaf will form, like the first new leaf that comes out will form, but it won't form completely. But then the next one that comes out ends up being like a lot bigger and like fully healthy. I've noticed this a lot with my melanochrysum for sure. So I'd usually just pull it right off. So we're kind of starting over again. It kind of sucks that like this plant looks like this and I already have to extend it, but I'm not going to chop it again, because the point is I want it to get reestablished, and I want to start this process all over. Because I think if this leaf is anything like this size, I should in theory be able to get some nice big juicy leaves maybe by like the end of the year, hopefully, if I can keep this going. But this plant humbled me for sure. And I don't know, I just feel like that's kind of the nature of this hobby, and something that we have to remind ourselves of sometimes, because it's not like a hobby where we're just like collecting like figurines, or we're collecting cards, or you know, something where, because we are collecting in a sense, we are, but it's not like it just stays stagnant. It's like every plant is going to be different. The genetics and the strength of a plant is always going to be different. The seasons change, your schedule changes. And if you really think about it, like the scale of plants that we have and balancing everything that needs to be done in this hobby, it's actually kind of impressive. So when I come across people that are like so snobby and are just like, how could you let that happen? Or like, I would never let that happen. Or like, this is what my plant looks like and I only do this. It's like, first off, good for you, no one asked, but also it's like, this hobby is so unlike anything else. I feel like the only thing it can be compared to are like aquarium hobbyists, or like reptile breeding hobbyists, like where you're dealing with live things that need you all the time. So this plant was just a reminder of that, and I did have to kind of be down on myself for a while and just kind of like accept the fact that all that work that I had put in just kind of went downhill in a very, very short period of time. And it is a hard pill to swallow. I'm not gonna sit here and say like, oh, that's just the nature of this hobby and now I get to start over again and it's gonna be all fine and dandy. No, I wasn't happy. I worked so hard to get it to the size that it was, and I wish that it was that size now, but that's just not the reality. So we're starting over, and this is where we are now. Very, very painful process, but you know, at least I learned a little bit from it. I know that it's possible in my care to size up, because I really truly doubt my ability sometimes. I'm like, everyone else can grow it to a certain size and whatever, but not me. And that's kind of how I feel about anthurium. I feel like I'm always gonna be sort of in this area where my anthurium stay this size, because I'm not like the greatest with anthurium, and the more that I say it out loud and the more that I sort of embrace it, the easier it is for me to enjoy the anthurium hobby, because otherwise I think I would just be frustrated all the time. So anywho, that's my TED Talk about that. Now we're gonna get into the last one, which is also the most painful, and that is my philodendron glorious. I've had 2 plants, I think. I got one from a friend, and then I got my second one, which is the one I'm going to show you from, I think it was from Jane, Alice, and Aaron for my birthday one year. Can't remember which birthday it was, but at this time I had been in my era of wanting multiple of the same plants that I really loved, and one of them was the glorious. And this one specifically, when I got it, to me, this was a really, really big plant. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is more than I could have ever dreamed of, and like there's so many leaves on it. It's such a great plant to like, you know, get started on a pole, and I was just really, really stoked about it. Because it was such a special plant to me, I had gotten it from my favorite people. I babied this thing like crazy, and I wanted to see it thrive. I definitely put more effort into this glorious than my other one. I sort of put that one on the back burner. I'm pretty sure I even like gave it away. I think I might have given it to my mom or my sister or something, but I put all my eggs into this one basket, and I just like nurtured that baby, and it rewarded me, honestly. It was a lot of maintenance in making sure that it always had a pole. I had it on a lazy pole. I was regularly fertilizing it with CalMag. I had it growing in my tent for a while. I wanted to give it like the optimal conditions. So it was in my tent for the longest time, and it was growing really well, almost too well, and it outgrew my tent really fast. So then I moved it out into my plant room because it's more humid, and I wouldn't say more humid, but it's definitely more warm in there. I had gotten a few new leaves while it was living there. It wasn't getting a ton of light, honestly, because it was just on the floor, and I was surprised at how well it was growing despite being taken out of the tent. And I was just smitten. I had it in the background of so many of my like YouTube videos for a while. I was taking so many photos of it. I was putting it on my story, and I was like, I was really, really showing that thing off because I was so proud of it. I loved it so much. It just had like these big, beautiful, dark leaves, and it was everything that I loved about that plant. And then I started dealing with the first issue that I had was with EFN. This plant pushed out so much extra floral nectaries, I couldn't keep up with it. It was like I would give it a bath, and then 1 or 2 days later, the whole entire bath would be filled again with the sap. And it burned through the leaves, and just like slowly, one by one, all of the leaves started being overtaken with these yellow spots. I couldn't keep up with giving it showers, and some people have said that like they leave the EFN and it doesn't burn through, but honestly it really is a case-by-case thing with me. I have plants in my collection that push out EFN and I don't bother with it, and it doesn't burn through the leaf. One example of that is my, I think it's called a philodendron Billy Black, or people say it's the Billy Atabapuense hybrid. That one pushes out a lot of EFN, and it doesn't burn through the leaves at all, and I don't know if it's because it's such a dark leaf, but my glorious is one where if I left it on for even like a day or two, it's gonna burn through that puppy so quickly, and it would just overtake the entire leaves to the point where I just had to cut it off because it just looked so awful and terrible. So that was one issue, and then the second issue was the spider mites. This plant got attacked so bad. It was like a full infestation, and when the spider mites were at its worst, the EFN was also at its worst too, and I just could not figure it out. So again, like my my majestic, one by one, I'm like, I just have to start cutting off these leaves because they look so terrible. The leaves are so large that when one leaf has spider mites, it's just so hard to contain it on a full plant, especially when the leaves are so close, they're all touching. And so I had to make the very, very painful decision of not only chopping the leaves off, but just like chopping the plant down, because this plant was actually really tall. I think sitting on the floor, it was probably getting about as tall as me. It was probably almost 4 feet 5 inches, and I'm 4'11". So it might have been even taller than that, but because all the lower leaves were yellowing, they had all these spots that I had chopped off, I was left with this stem that was like a mile long, and I'm like, well, what am I gonna do with this? I can't just put this whole thing on a pole. So I chopped it. I chopped it into like 3 pieces. I gave the mid cut to my mom. I kept the bottom cutting and I kept the top cutting. So let me show you what those look like. So this is the top cutting now. When I first chopped it, it actually did have a few leaves. I think it had 2 leaves up at the top, and it was still on this pole. I didn't like change it or anything. I was not getting a new leaf for a long time. It was just like stuck in time. Both of the leaves on it looked really crappy, and I thought keeping it on would, I don't know, like, you know, keep those nutrients and hopefully give it enough strength to like push out a new leaf. And I was talking to Amanda, or I think I maybe like, I don't know what happened, but we were having a conversation one day, and I showed her my glorious, and she's like, chop those leaves off. And I was like, what? And they were big. The leaves that were on it were maybe like this big, because it was like the top cutting, right? It was pretty large. And I was like, chop it off? Like, really? She's like, trust me. She's like, chop it off, and that stem is gonna wake up, like a new leaf is gonna push out. So I trust Amanda with my life. If Amanda jumps, I jump too. So I just, on camera, well, I took a video for her. I just snipped them all off, threw it away, and it was just a stick. I just had literally this whole setup here with the pole, this big old pot. I couldn't even be bothered. I was like, I'm just gonna chop off the leaves, but I'm gonna leave it. I'm not gonna do anything else. So yeah, it was just in my tent like this as a stick for maybe 3 days. Seriously, like a couple days after, the caterpillar started waking up. And I like texted Amanda right away. I was like, oh my gosh, you are a freaking genius. Like, this plant wasn't doing anything for so long. And of course, the second I chop the leaves off, a new leaf grows. So all of this, so this was actually the first leaf that grew after Amanda told me to chop the original leaves off. And it doesn't look great, but I was really happy with the size. I was like, okay, I feel like I'm being given at least something to work with, because even if it's a top cutting, it doesn't really guarantee that the leaf is going to continue along the same size. Like, the leaf that came before this was like 3 times this size. So yeah, it did sort of downsize quite a bit, but just looking at this as it is, I was like, I think that I'm going to be in a good place to get, you know, the leaves back to where they were. So then this leaf came out. Whoa. And you can kind of see here in this corner where these spots are. So this is what I was talking about when I was telling you guys about the spots that would show up on the leaf. But imagine this on the entire leaf, not just in this one spot. And if you look at the back, I don't know if you can see it in the viewfinder, but there's EFN, and it's so sticky. If I don't remove the EFN right away, it burns through it like this. But if I wipe it off in time, then it doesn't burn through it. So that's what I was dealing with that plant before. I'm glad that I actually have something to show you. And now it's pushing out another leaf here, and it looks like it's gonna be pretty big. So I'm just so glad that I like didn't fuss with this setup anymore. I just kept it as it was, and I can see like even the nodes are waking up. Like, do you guys see all those roots that are now wanting to go into the pole? I'm so happy that, you know, I've been given a second chance with this plant, and it sort of like bounced back and kind of almost picked up where it left off. It's not quite where it was before, but it's not like I'm starting over from like this little teeny tiny plant. I feel like, you know, when you play like a game, like you start off at like a checkpoint. I feel like I got a checkpoint, and yeah, I'm happy with it. But remember how I told you I kept another cutting? I was gonna get rid of this, but something told me to keep it just because of how thick that stem was. I've talked about it before. If you want to kind of gauge how big a leaf is going to be, like from a propagation, you always want to go with the thicker stem. And if you want to start with a larger plant, I just find that all of my propagations, when you're working with a large stem or like a thick stem, the new plant that comes out of it is likely going to be a lot larger. But you do have scenarios like this where look at how thick this gloriosum chunk is, but look how small the new growth point is. So it's not, for me, it's never like a guarantee, but if I can work with the thicker stem, that's going to be my option. So this is the mid cut of the glorious, and it's actually bigger than the top cutting, which was a surprise. And you can see here where it was chopped. I mean, sorry, this is the bottom cutting, not the mid cut. And I have had a few leaves before this leaf, but they were a little bit smaller. I just kept chopping them back. I am getting some of the spots on this plant again. So I'm not looking forward to dealing with the EFN again. I thought it was because it didn't like being outside of a greenhouse, but both of these are being grown in my tent and they have spots. So as much as I love this plant, I'm not having a great time with the extra floral nectaries. I was talking to Tyler, this is Tyler, and he is like a freaking plant wizard. He grows things so massive indoors. I have spoken to him and he's struggled with the same thing with the EFN on the glorious and couldn't really quite figure it out. And we've ruled out pests, we've ruled out humidity and stuff like that, but it's just a thing that happens. So if you guys deal with extra floral nectaries specifically on your, what plant is this? Glorious. Can you guys please tell me all the things? I'm just like, I would love to know people's experiences so that I can just like gather more information and data, because I love the glorious deeply. It's two of my favorite plants put into one. I would love to try and grow it back to its former glory, but I really don't want to go through what I went through last time with the EFN, because it was too much of a heartbreaking process to experience. Like honestly, it's like you see these ginormous magical leaves and then slowly every single day you're seeing more spots and more spots, and you can only like drag it to your shower so many times until you're just like, I give up. Just do whatever you want to do. So if I had to choose one plant that was the most roller coaster whirlwind romance of all of them, it's gonna be the glorious, and I think it's because I love it the most out of all of these plants put together. So that's that. I hope you guys enjoyed this little list, walking down memory lane. It was a experience for me. I don't really like reminiscing on the things that make me sad in this hobby, but sometimes it's necessary. And of course, you know, I always want to be like as transparent with you guys on this channel. So I'd love to know what your roller coaster whirlwind romance plants are. If you have any that are on the same list as mine, let me know. Also, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, because it helps us a lot on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching another video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.